There is a smell that comes up from the hollows in early spring. If you have ever been in the Appalachian Mountains in April, really in them, not on the overlooks or the parkways, but down in the creek bottoms where the light barely reaches and the soil is black and cold, you know this smell. It is green and sharp and wild, like onion, like garlic, like something older than either. It rises out of the leaf litter in the places where the snow melts last, where the first thin light of the year filters down through bare branches and reaches the ground. It is the smell of ramps, wild leeks, Allium trichocum, one of the first green things to come up in the mountains after winter, and one of the most intensely, powerfully fragrant plants in the eastern forest. People have been harvesting ramps in these mountains for thousands of years, long before the Scots-Irish settlers came over the ridge, long before anyone was keeping records. And the old-timers, the ones whose grandmothers' grandmothers learned this knowledge from people who were here before them, the old-timers all say the same thing. Don't follow the smell too deep into the holler. Take what's near the edge. Take what you can see from the trail. And when the smell gets stronger instead of fainter the deeper you go, when it should be thinning out and it doesn't, stop, turn around, come home, because something has been tending those ramps for a very long time, and it does not give without taking. A woman named Carla Vess didn't listen. This is her story. Carla Vess was 26 years old and had moved to Grayson County, Virginia, 8 months before this happened, following a breakup and a job offer, and the particular restlessness that comes from living in a city for too long. She was from Richmond originally, but her mother's people were from the mountains. A great-grandmother who had been born in a holler in Wythe County, a grandmother who had spent summers up here as a child and spoken about it in terms usually reserved for lost paradise. Carla had grown up on those stories. She had always meant to come. She rented a small farmhouse on a dirt road outside Fry's on the New River, and she worked remotely for a marketing firm, and she spent her weekends doing what people who have recently escaped cities do, learning the land around her, learning which creek to fish in, and which ridge to watch for the sunset, and which neighbors to wave at and which to leave alone. She was learning. She was happy. She found out about ramp season from her neighbor, an older man named Dillard who raised cattle on the property adjoining hers and who had the unhurried conversational style of someone who had never been required to get to the point quickly. He told her about ramps the way you'd told a child about something wonderful. The taste, the smell, the ritual of the spring harvest, the ramp festivals in the small mountain towns where people ate them fried in butter and scrambled with eggs and pickled in brine, and the whole town smelled for a week. He told her where to look for them, the creek bottoms, the north-facing slopes, the places the old-timers called ramp flats. Then he told her not to follow the smell too deep into Creasy Holler. He said it the way you said something you'd been saying your whole life without having to explain it, matter-of-factly, as one item in a list of local knowledge. Take the fire road to the second gate. Park at the pull-off. Follow the creek up maybe a quarter mile. The ramps will be thick on the right bank. Take what you need and come back. Don't follow the smell if it gets stronger going in instead of weaker. That means you've gone far enough. Carla thanked him for the tip and did not ask about the last part, because she was new and she was polite, and she filed it away in the same category as all the other things that local people said that seemed like superstition but were probably just old habit. She drove to Creasy Holler on the first Saturday of April. She found the ramps exactly where Dillard said they'd be, thick on the right bank of the creek in a wide flat below a limestone outcrop. They were beautiful, broad, glossy leaves like lily of the valley, the white bulbs just visible at the soil line, the smell rising off them in waves when she pushed through the first stand. Rich and green and ancient. She filled her bag. She was happy. The creek ran cold over the rocks, and the early wildflowers were coming up in the margins, and the bare trees overhead were just beginning to haze with the first green of new leaves. She noticed, as she worked, that the smell was getting stronger the further up the creek she went. She noticed that, and she kept moving upstream. She told herself she wanted to see how far the ramp flat extended. That was true, but it was not the whole truth. The whole truth was that the smell had become something extraordinary, not just strong, but layered, complex in a way that a single plant variety shouldn't be, as if there was something else growing in among the ramps that she couldn't identify, something that gave the familiar scent a sweeter undertone, almost floral, almost like she couldn't name it. That was partly why she kept going. The creek bottom narrowed as the holler deepened. The limestone walls rose on either side, and the canopy closed overhead, and the light went from pale spring morning to something dimmer and older, the green-tinged half-light of a place that didn't see full sun. The ramps grew thicker here, impossibly thick, carpeting both banks in overlapping leaves so dense the ground wasn't visible beneath them. She walked for another 20 minutes before she saw the garden. It announced itself first in the arrangement. The ramps in the wild, even in a dense natural stand, grew in the loose, irregular pattern of undirected growth, clustering around favorable soil, thinning out over rocks, following the moisture gradient of the creek bank, chaotic, natural. These ramps were planted, rows. Not perfectly straight rows, not the mechanical precision of commercial agriculture, but deliberate rows, curved to follow the contour of the creek bank, spaced with clear intention, with other plants interplanted between them in a pattern she couldn't immediately identify. She recognized some of what was growing alongside the ramps: black cohosh, bloodroot, Solomon's seal, ginseng. Native medicinal plants, all of them, the traditional pharmacopoeia of Appalachian herbalism. But there were plants she didn't recognize too, low-growing things with dark leaves and tiny flowers the color of dried blood. The garden occupied a flat section of the creek bottom, perhaps 100 feet long and 40 feet wide. At the upstream end, a single large stone, flat-topped, waist-high, the surface worn smooth, stood in the center of the planting like an altar. On the stone, a clay bowl. In the bowl, something dark and dried and old that she did not look at closely. She stood at the edge of the garden for a long time. The smell here was overwhelming, not unpleasant, but total, filling every breath, filling her head, making the edges of her thoughts go soft and strange. She thought, someone tends this garden. Someone has been tending it for a long time, given the size of some of these ginseng roots. Someone knows these plants deeply. She thought, I should not be here. She was reaching for her phone to take a photograph when she heard the voice. It came from somewhere upstream, beyond the garden, in the deeper dark of the holler. Her grandmother's voice. Her grandmother had been dead for 4 years. Carla had been at her bedside when she went. She knew this voice the way she knew her own heartbeat, the particular soft rasp of it, the Wythe County vowels that never left no matter how many decades her grandmother had lived in Richmond, the specific warmth of it when it said Carla's name. It said her name now, from somewhere in the dark at the end of the garden. Carla. She ran. She did not know she was going to run until she was already running, back down the creek bank the way she had come, through the dense ramp carpet, under the narrowing limestone walls, back toward the light. She ran without looking back. She ran until the holler opened up, and the light came back, and the ramp flat thinned to its natural scattered growth, and she could see the pull-off and her car. She sat in her car for a long time with the doors locked. Then she drove home. She did not tell anyone what she had seen, not Dillard, not her mother, not anyone. That night, sitting at her kitchen table, she realized she had not brought any ramps home. She also realized, in the way you realize something you already knew, that the voice from the holler had not sounded like a recording of her grandmother or a memory of her grandmother. It had sounded like her grandmother, present tense, alive, speaking to her from 40 yards away in a garden at the end of a holler that no one else seemed to know existed. The trouble began 3 days later. Carla had not slept well since the holler. She chalked it up to the strangeness of the experience, the adrenaline of the run, the unresolved quality of what she'd heard. She was a practical person. She had a degree in communications. She had worked in an office. She owned a car with good tires and a sensible coat. And she was doing the practical person's work of explaining the inexplicable in terms that didn't require her worldview to crack. She had heard an echo, a bird, her own fear playing tricks on her in a confined stone space with unusual acoustics. She almost believed it. Then she lost her appetite. Not gradually, not the way appetite ebbed in stress or illness. Overnight, completely, she woke on the 4th day after the holler, and the thought of food made her stomach seize with something that was not quite nausea and not quite revulsion, but was close to both. She made herself eat half a piece of toast, and it sat in her like a stone. By day 6, she had eaten almost nothing. By day 8, she was not hungry. That was the part that frightened her. Not the inability to eat, but the absence of hunger. She should have been ravenous. Instead, she felt clean, hollow, light, as if her body had found some other source of fuel, some other way of maintaining itself that didn't require food at all. She felt, she said, as if she were being sustained. On the 9th night, she heard her grandmother's voice from the tree line. She was sitting on the porch at dusk, wrapped in a blanket in the cold April evening, watching the last light leave the ridge when it came. Quiet, conversational, the way her grandmother had spoken when she was telling you something she assumed you already knew. "Carla, honey, come back down to the creek." She sat very still. The voice was coming from the dark margin of the woods at the edge of her yard, not from inside the woods, not from some depth she couldn't place, but from right there, 10 feet past the fence line, in the shadow under the first row of trees. She said, "Mama." She didn't mean to say it. It came out of her the way a word came out when you were startled, involuntary, helpless. The voice said, "I've got something for you, down by the creek. Come see what I've been growing." Carla went inside. She locked the door. She sat on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinets and her knees pulled to her chest, and she stayed there until the voice stopped and the night sounds of the woods came back. The spring peepers, the creek, the wind. She called her mother in the morning. She did not tell her about the voice. She asked her carefully what her grandmother had said about the mountains, about the hollers, about the old beliefs. Her mother was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Why do you ask?" "Just curious," Carla said. She talked about it sometimes, the plants she knew, the old women who taught her. Her mother was quiet again. "Mom." "She told me once," her mother said slowly, "that her grandmother's grandmother had gone into the holler in the spring and come back different, that she stopped eating, that she heard things, that she kept trying to go back." A pause. She said the women who knew about it called it being called by the ramp witch, that it wanted something from you, and until you gave it, it would keep calling. "What did it want?" Carla asked. Her mother said, "Someone to tend the garden." The line was quiet. "What happened to her grandmother's grandmother?" Her mother said, "She went back." "Did she come home?" A very long pause. "Not the same. Not exactly the same. She came home, but she was different. She knew the plants after that. She became one of the granny women. She lived to 93, and she always smelled like ramps, even in the winter, even when nothing was growing. And on her deathbed, she told your great-great-grandmother, 'Don't follow the smell.'" Carla sat with the phone against her ear and the kitchen window bright with morning and the voice from last night still vibrating in her chest like a tuning fork. But she was okay. She lived. She was okay. Her mother said she was different. Dillard came by 2 days later with a pie his wife had made, the way neighbors did, and he took one look at Carla and set the pie on the porch rail and sat down in the other chair without being invited. "You went too deep," he said. It wasn't a question. She told him. Not everything, not her grandmother's voice, not the nights on the kitchen floor, but the garden, the stone, the bowl, the smell that got stronger instead of weaker. He listened without interrupting, which she had learned was his way. When she finished, he was quiet for a while, looking out at the ridge. "My daddy's daddy," he said finally, "knew a woman up Creasy who kept the garden. Before her it was another woman, and before that another. Goes back as far as anyone can trace." He paused. "It's not evil. I want to say that first because people always think that. It's not evil. It's just old. Older than us. Older than the mountains, maybe. It tends the plants and the plants tend it, and every so often it decides it needs a new keeper, a new granny woman to learn the garden." "What if I don't want to be a granny woman?" Carla said. He looked at her with an expression that was not unkind. "How long since you ate?" he asked. She said nothing. "How long since it let you sleep?" She looked at her hands. "You got two choices as I understand it," he said. "You go back, you meet it, you make whatever agreement gets made, or you leave, not just the county, not just the state, get as far as you can get, and maybe the calling fades, and maybe it doesn't, but you don't make the agreement, and you don't tend the garden, and you don't get the knowledge." He paused. "My daddy's daddy said the woman who kept the garden before the last one tried to leave. She went to Ohio. She lasted about 2 months before she came back. She was very thin by then." Carla looked at the tree line. "Why my family? Why me?" "Your blood's from here," he said. "Your great-great-grandmother and her grandmother before her, and back and back. It knows the line. When the last keeper went, it started looking for the next one in the blood that was closest. That brought you here." He said it simply, without drama. "You came home is all, even if you didn't know it." She went back to Creasy Holler on a Wednesday morning at first light. She tells the story of what happened in the garden the way you tell a story you're not sure you're allowed to tell, carefully, leaving some things out, watching your listener's face to see if they understand what's being said beneath what's being said. She says she went into the garden. She says it was waiting. She says it did not look the way she expected. She expected something monstrous, and it was not monstrous. She expected something threatening, and it was not threatening. It was old, and it was not entirely one thing. Not plant, not animal, not the ghost of her grandmother, though it wore that voice and that shape for a time, and she understood that it had taken that shape because it had reached into her grief and found the face she would not run from. She says they talked. She cannot tell me what was said. She says it was not really language, or not only language. She says she agreed. She came home from Creasy Holler on a Wednesday morning at first light. She came home with mud on her boots and ramps in her bag and an appetite that hit her like a wall the moment she crossed the fence line of her property. 3 weeks of hunger arriving all at once, ravenous and immediate and purely physical. She ate everything in her kitchen. She slept for 14 hours. She did not hear her grandmother's voice again. Carla Vess still lives outside Freeze. She still works remotely. She still drives the same practical car. She still waves at Dillard when she passes his property, and he waves back, and sometimes he stops by with something his wife made. But things are different now. She knows the plants. Not the way you know plants from a field guide, the names, the identifying features, the range descriptions, She knows them the way the old granny women knew them. Which root for fever? Which leaf for wound? Which combination of three things that grew within 20 feet of each other would do something that no doctor could explain, but that worked, reliably, the way nothing in a pharmacy worked? She knows it the way you know a language you learned before you knew you were learning. Not studied, not memorized. Present. She has been called on twice now by people in the county. Both times referrals from Dillard, who said only that she knew the plants and that people should go to her with the things that didn't respond to other treatment. She doesn't advertise. She doesn't have a sign. She doesn't charge money, though people leave things. Both cases were things the hospitals had given up on. Both resolved. She doesn't explain how. She goes to the garden 3 times a year: the spring ramp harvest, the summer solstice, and the last warm weekend before frost. She goes alone. She does not tell anyone what happens there. She has told me one thing about it. She says the stone altar at the upstream end of the garden is different than it was the first time she saw it. The clay bowl is the same, but around the base of the stone now, worked into the stone as if they had always been there, are names. Dozens of them. Women's names, some in scripts she doesn't recognize, going back, she estimates, hundreds of years. Her name is there too. She found it on her second visit, carved fresh into the stone in letters she recognized as her own handwriting, though she had not carved it herself. She does not find this frightening anymore. She finds it, she says, comforting. She finds it like coming home. Her mother came to visit in August. They sat on the porch in the evenings and watched the bats come out, and Carla cooked things from the garden. And her mother ate and didn't ask about the smell that clung faintly to everything in the house, green and sharp and old, like something that had been growing since before any of them were born. On the last evening, her mother said, "Your great-great-grandmother would have known what to make of all this." Carla said, "I think she does know." Her mother looked at her. "She's on the stone. Her name is on the stone." Her mother was quiet for a long time. "Are you okay here? Are you happy here?" Carla looked at the ridge, at the dark line of the tree line, at the hollow in the hills where Creasy Holler ran south into the mountain. "Yes," she said, and meant it. And that, maybe, is the most frightening part. The old-timers still say it. Don't follow the smell too deep. Take what's near the edge. Come home. They say it every spring, at the ramp festivals and the feed stores, and the end-of-driveway conversations that mountain people have instead of small talk. And most people do come home. Most people follow the creek up a quarter mile, fill their bag, and walk back out into the sunlight and drive home and fry the ramps in butter, and that's the whole story. But every now and then, every generation or two, going back as far as anyone can trace, someone follows the smell all the way in, and the garden gets a new keeper, and the knowledge stays alive, and something old and patient and rooted in this earth like the oldest tree and the oldest holler continues, tending, waiting, calling. It's April soon. The ramps will be coming up. If you find yourself in the mountains, if you find yourself in a creek bottom somewhere, and the smell gets stronger the further in you go instead of weaker, I want you to remember this story. And then, I want you to make a choice. If the ramp witch got into your head tonight, I am not sorry. That is exactly where it was meant to go. Subscribe and hit the bell. We go dark in here every week, and you don't want to miss what's coming. Leave a comment and tell me, If something ancient and patient offered you knowledge, offered you purpose, offered you a place in something that had been going on for centuries, would you take the bargain? I genuinely want to know. I read every one. Stay warm out there.